Following the 2020 US elections, what's our view on how US politics is likely to influence stocks moving forward? And in today's politically charged world, how do my values impact my investments? And finally, what about global politics? How do they play in?
We view politics differently than most people do. And we view a lot of things differently than most people do. But the reality, as Jeff alluded to earlier, is a separation in my view as the way you should think about politics. There's the part about politics, which is the yak and the excitement that is maybe a little bit like watching the crowd at a big time wrestling match. And then there's the part that actually impacts commerce and over the 3 to 30 month time frame, the capital markets in any material way, which is what gets changed that creates uncertainty and alteration of business planning. And in the United States, as Jeff alluded to earlier, there is this unprecedented gridlock for this point in a Democratic administration. The House of Representatives has the thinnest margins for a new Democrat since 1893. The Senate has the thinnest margins for a new Democratic president since, and I know all of you recall this very well, but the initial administration of Grover Cleveland in 1885. We all recall those days warmly. The fact is that this, for a first year of a president's term in a Democratic administration, is as gridlocked as we have ever seen, allowing us how Grover Cleveland was the first Democratic president after the Civil War. And when we think about what really impacts capital markets, it's changes in big controversial legislation. Pretty much completely. There's other things, but they're littler, much littler. So, for example, as you've already seen, the Biden administration has issued quite a lot of executive orders coming out the gate, and they said they would. But most of them, and people don't quite get this, it's overly simple and it's not perfectly true, but it's mostly true. Most of them simply undo executive orders that previously President Trump had issued, which most of them undid previous executive orders that formerly President Obama had done. And the total net consequence of that to the economic reality that impact capital markets over the 3 to 30 is not terribly huge, kind of small. The fact is, in today's world, for example, in the Senate, in a not literal sense, but close there too, relatively conservative Democrat Senator Joe Manchin is arguably the kingpin of the Senate, arguably has more power than Chuck Schumer. Takes one vote to stop Democrats from passing anything. But then there's also other ones like Senator Sinema and actually a handful that on this, that, and the other, thinking about their own futures, won't necessarily be in alignment with the Democratic Party, creating the effect of gridlock in that first year. But to the third part of your question, Jessica, before I get to the second part, this is also an unusual time in that with very high yak, heated, divisive, hostile commentary from one side of spectrums to the other side of spectrums inside America and globally, gridlock is more widespread globally than ever. You've got a huge amount of hand waving and excitement in Italy over their failed government and the move to try to get Mario Draghi to be out of retirement, which he is doing, to try to form a government. But this government if it gets formed, will be a do-nothing government for legislation. We've got elections coming up in Holland, which will create nothing. We have issues in country after country. In September, you've got German elections. They similarly are as pancaked in terms of ideological thrust as you can get. A multi-party coalition, a so-called grand coalition there, will have a do-nothing quality to it that's virtually unprecedented. And there is no one with the clout in Germany, with the popularity, with the gravitas, to be able to replace the position that Angela Merkel had. The fact is, Brexit's over, and there's again lots of yak in Britain, nothing much happening that impacts the concerns capital markets care about. This is also true in Austria. This is true in France. This is true across most of Scandinavia. This is true in a different way, but true in Japan. And that global gridlock creates this process of relatively unexpected but falling uncertainty and the ability of businesses to hold a steadier course moving forward through this 2021 timeframe. The part about the questions of your political ideology, Jessica, well, actually, just between you and I don't know your political ideology, and I don't think I need to answer your question. But the fact of the matter is that, I think probably almost everyone that's going to be watching this video has their own political ideology, and there's a couple of points to remember about this. And some of them, I think you probably know we would say, and maybe some of them you don't know we would say. One of them is that when you look, for example, at America, to a very fine degree, how America is divided, the makeup of the division, the geographic separations of where things lean more to the left and more to the right and all that kind of stuff is exceptionally well known. And therefore, because markets pre-price all widely known, is pre-priced. Secondarily, your own views, for most people, tend not to be unique. They tend to be parallel to a lot of other people's that fall into that pre-priced mode. So, for example, that's exactly why we have MSNBC and Fox TV, Fox News. They're just pandering to different audiences. Now, I'm going to be real jaundiced here. But most of what you would hear in places like that is, well, maybe you get more real news out of watching reruns of the Flintstones. The fact of the matter is that most of this stuff is coming from a place. If you watch it, they know you're coming from that place too, and they're giving you an awful lot of half-truths and often non-truths, regardless of what you're watching, because that's what that's devolved into in this time frame. So let me go to a different point. You may not like me saying that, but it's true. You are, in my view, more than entitled to your ideological views. I keep mine to myself, basically. So, and I work very hard to make sure they don't seep into our market outlooks. I encourage you to do the same. Let me say this differently. A lot of people today are either of the left and don't like the right, or of the right and don't like the left, you know that. But I just want you to note that when President Obama was elected initially, the market did well. A lot of people didn't think that would happen. Most of them on the other side of the political spectrum. When President Trump was elected, the market did really well initially. Most people on the left side of the political spectrum, they were surprised by that and they didn't expect it. You remember, I hope you remember, that the initial view was if he's elected, boy, the market's going to go to a kind of handbasket. And then, of course, now President Biden and the market's been doing well. Why? Because of what Jeff referenced earlier in the beginning, falling uncertainty. It's the falling uncertainty that markets worry about, not the ideology. Now, let me just go to a point that people never say. Used to be, not so much recently, there was quite a lot of desire on the part of some people for particular causes to boycott certain stocks. Boycott stock X because they do bad stuff. I get the emotion. The act is actually counterproductive every which way but loose. If the stock's going to do well, it's counterproductive to your portfolio returns. Separate issue. And if you could get everybody, which you can't, to boycott that stock and drive down the price, drive it down, drive it down, drive it down, drive it down, you would actually free them to be able to do all the things you think are terrible because you set them up to be able to arrange alternate financing more easily, go down that path. Boycotting's never worked. It's never accomplished the goal that boycotters hope it will in its fundamental real world reality. On the other side of the coin, in the real world, I think most of those activities don't help much. The way you deal with that stuff is through legislation and the government and those types of things, not so much by doing things like boycotting. And I encourage you, regardless, whether you're on the left side of the political spectrum or the right side of the political spectrum, when you think about the other side, this is a really good time to take a deep breath and remember whatever this stuff is, legislatively, which is the most important part, in big ways, little is going to happen in 2021, 2022, and get less excited than places like Fox News and MSNBC, regardless of what your ideology is, want to drive you toward being. This is a good time to kind of keep your eye on the ball overall, because overall, it's not really such a bad world.
And for views on current events in the world of investing, visit marketminder.com. Updated daily, it offers on-demand access to Fisher Investments' most current thoughts on capital markets and the global economy, as well as our sometimes irreverent commentary. We hope you will enjoy it.